Well, it certainly delivered on the hype. After all the build-up, Ireland and South Africa produced a World Cup classic on Saturday night. And although Andy Farrell's men came out on the right side of the result, there is still a long, long way to go if they want to claim the ultimate prize in Paris next month. Still, we have plenty to talk about on today's episode of The Left Wing. Will Slattery here, and I'm delighted to be joined once again by Luke Fitzgerald and Jonathan Bradley. And thanks again for everyone who reached out on Twitter, YouTube, and Spotify. We really appreciate all your comments, even all the ones that came from South African supporters. But now let's look back on what was a very dramatic game, probably the most dramatic game any of us have ever experienced. And Jonathan, I'll go to you first. Like, I posed a question last Tuesday, if we were sitting here in a week's time, like, what would an Ireland victory look like in your opinion? Like, now that we are here, that did come to pass. How did the reality match up with what we were kind of kicking around last week?
Yeah, well, beyond the fact that I said Ireland would win by 5, I have to get that in early doors. But it didn't look like the way that I think any of us thought that it would, because one of the prerequisites that we talked about was getting the set piece right. Ireland didn't do that. One of the things that we talked about was almost viewing this game as like one of, if not the best attack in the world against the best defence in the world. But so much of what Ireland did and did well was actually without the ball, like especially in those first 20 minutes. Like, you were watching that thinking this could get properly hairy. But to be fair to Ireland, and I think you have to give them the due for this, they stuck at it and they defended brilliantly. Like, against this team that we talk about as having this vaunted defence, the more impactful and the more, I suppose, eye-catching defence was actually from Ireland.
Luke, in terms of, I suppose, headline, why did Ireland win this game? Like, what are you writing?
I actually don't think it's possible to answer it in a headline, Will. I think it's an oversimplification of it. There's a huge amount of factors went into this. We probably went through a good few of them. Like, I think South Africa's squad selection pre-tournament, some of it forced by injury, but some of it just decision making around personnel. That really undid them. Around, I think, options off the bench. Obviously the injury to Marks is a killer, but not having a third hooker is a big mistake. No goal kicker in the squad. No, really someone who doesn't kick regularly for their club week in, week out, or has kicked for the South African team, on occasion before this, like with the high percentage return. Like, those two things really came back to haunt them. I think I thought the defense was actually the kind of key part, and it was funny because there's been a lot of stats thrown around this week, Will, about, all the collisions, all the impact kind of collisions that South Africa had, and they had a huge number of dominant tackles. I think it was 30 was thrown out. But I think Jonathan's exactly right. And I talked about it last week. Very hard to win collisions with these guys one-on-one all the time consistently. Just big men. But what you have to do is the collisions have to happen in places before the gain line. And that's really key. That's a key point that I think was lost in all the chat, because people were kind of figuring out, well, this is the highest ever amount of impact tackles we've seen, or collisions. How did Ireland win this thing? And they're kind of just saying it's great. Well, no, not really. I think Ireland were really, really smart about, how they committed to breakdowns. They thought they timed that really well. Sometimes they went in with one fetcher. Sometimes they fanned out. Other times, they committed 3 or 4 bodies when the timing was right. They did that brilliantly too. So I thought the ruck was another key component of the defence. Or the defensive effort. But I thought they got off the line and hit them earlier, which is very, very important, I think. And they had a lot of chop tackles. So they were kind of key things. Like, and it's funny, like, a lot of the chat has been, geez, we worried about seeing South Africa again in the competition. I think they'd be worried about seeing us too. Like, we turned down a lot of, kind of goal kicking opportunities as well for lineouts that didn't go our way. And either way you look at that, I don't think Ireland will Ireland's lineout will be as bad again. Or I think if they take the points, the complexion of the game might have been very different as well. So all the chat has been about South Africa knocking. I think that was a brilliant contest between two teams that is very, very, it's very tight between both sides. And I think it will be, like, I don't think either side would be unbelievably pleased about seeing the other if it comes to pass later in the competition. Which is something that I don't even know why we're talking about. I feel like we're really getting ahead of ourselves. I know
you were the one who brought it up. Like, I didn't say it.
No, sorry. But I'm talking about us as a country. Will, like, sorry, I didn't mean it just in here, kind of a wider context. It's something that I was concerned about. I tweeted about it after kind of, the interview straight after the match with Bundy Aki. I was kind of going, maybe we'll see them. He kind of mentioned in passing, oh, we'll probably see them again later on. I was like, oh, please. Like, all I could do is think about World Cup 2015, people crying coming off the pitch. My roommate at the time, which I ate alive in the room after for it. Just thinking, God, like, imagine you're New Zealand looking at that, and we do expect, a result next week. It'd be a surprise, in fairness, based on all the previous history, if Scotland were to turn us over. But it's not beyond the realms. If you're New Zealand, either way, you're looking at this thinking, oh, these lads think it's over and done. They've won a group match, and on the way to the final they go. So yeah, that was a little bit concerning.
Yeah, to be fair, that comment aside, I actually thought the players were like, listen to Johnny Sexton afterwards and Guy Ring. I thought they were pretty measured, actually. Like, I don't think anyone else was really too buoyant or certainly in their TV interviews afterwards. But yeah, I take your point, looking ahead too much. Jonathan, you touched on it there, like the idea that Ireland's set piece would have to be like really, really accurate to win this game. And like, watching it back again this morning is actually nice. Like, 2 days later, 3 days, whatever, when the drama, the result, what's coming. But like, Ireland in that first half, or even in the first 20 minutes, they lost 2 5-meter lineouts, 1 10 meters out, 1 on the 22. Caelan Doris also knocked the ball on the line. There was like another turnover penalty in the 22, and then just on halftime they knocked the ball on the 22 again. Like that's an outrageous amount of, I suppose, prolificacy, considering Ireland are usually so efficient. So I take the point in the second half. South Africa did get on top. They missed 4 kicks. They had a couple of balls. They dropped 2, but like, there was a sense after the game that if they had kicked their kicks, South Africa, it was game over. Whereas if you actually go over the full 80 minutes, which is what you have to do, Ireland left so much opportunities out there, which gives kind of room for growth, but also concern that the line-out, I don't think I've ever seen a line-out from an Ireland team in a big match malfunction quite as badly as that.
Yeah, I mean, we have to look at this and say, if we had been sitting here last week and been told Ireland are going to lose 6 lineouts, you would have thought that was the game. And I do take your point of what you're saying about, I suppose, the post-match narrative becoming, oh, but South Africa can get so much better, and I suppose ignoring the fact that, Ireland have this room for growth as well. And I think what Luke says is interesting, because I was thinking this during the game, but I didn't really see it talked about an awful lot after the game, obviously because Ireland won. Like, when the line-out was going as badly as it was, I don't know why they didn't take their points more and build a score that way, because the line-out clearly couldn't be relied upon. And I think if Ireland had lost the game, then that's probably a conversation that we're having a lot more of. But I would say I suppose the overarching reason for what you're saying is the fact that we are actually worried that Ireland's line-out isn't going to get better. Like, statistically, they're not going to lose that high a percentage again. But the line-out is an ongoing problem that Ireland have had now through the summer and through this World Cup beyond the Tonga game. Whereas if you're looking at South Africa, like, we can talk about the selection hubris and Rassie Erasmus, but like, I can't actually ever remember a test match of this magnitude essentially decided so decisively by things that we spent all week talking about. Like, you talk about the missed kicks, but even the hooker situation is madness. Like, as good a player as he is, you spend 60 minutes trying to tire Ireland out in the scrum. And then in the final quarter of the game, you've got a back rower scrummaging at hooker at international level against the number 1 side in the world. And how does it go? You give away a free kick that relieves the pressure on Ireland. That's just too easy and out. And then you give away a penalty that Jack Crowley then knocks over for 3 points in a game when there only were 21 points combined. Like, that on top of not having a frontline goal kicker, like, the point swing in that is unbelievable. And it's like I'm saying, I can't remember any game like this where it was just the pre-match narrative became so blindingly obvious over the course of the game that, to me, there's absolutely no way that South Africa ever go into a game like that again. And you can make the argument that, oh, maybe Rassie's being canny and he knew this wasn't a must-win. But I think that's where it comes from, the idea that there's absolutely no way that if there is a repeat of this game, that South Africa go in constituted in the way that they were for this game. Whereas against what, for my money and most people's money, is the best defensive line out in the world, there is a real possibility that Ireland have struggles in the set piece in another game, as much as I think Sheehan is a better thrower than Kelleher. So I think him coming in would offer some improvement there. But it's been such a long running thing now through the summer and through this World Cup that we have to have fears about systemic issues in the Irish line.
Yeah, to be fair, when Dan Sheehan came in, I don't think Ireland lost a line out, if I'm not mistaken. And, you mentioned Dion Foray and his scrummaging. He also threw a crooked throw on the 5 metre line, which, to be fair, they actually peeled away and Ireland got them just into touch anyway, but it was still given as a crooked throw. And look, the kicking point is interesting with South Africa because, it has been said a lot. If they kick their points, they win the game or some variation of that. But for me, I think that's a very simplistic way, considering like the big flashing warning sign about this team was their flakiness off the tee. They consistently went for kicks, even to very low percentage runs to the halfway line, one of which very fortuitously actually ended up being a try for them. So that is what this team is, the way it's currently constituted. So the idea that it came to pass and it did bite them in the arse, I'm not going to kind of give them a pass and say, oh, well, they basically won the game without the kicks. Because like that's not the case, really. Like they knew the kicking was poor. They insisted on kicking, a lot of kicks and missing them. Now, Pollard could come back in. As Rassie Erasmus said, like, he might be able to goal kick, but he's played 40 minutes of rugby in 6 months. He has to pass, he has to tackle, he has to tactically kick, he has to run the game. Like, we don't know how fit he is either. So that could have come back to bite them again later in the tournament as well. It's just, I found the whole thing from a South African perspective, I was a South African supporter today, very perplexing in terms of the decision-making Rassie, Jack Nienaber, the coaching staff have made. I think that would be my big takeaway if I was a South African supporter.
I get the point. I don't know if I subscribe to Rassie Erasmus being some kind of coaching messiah as of yet. Like brilliant performance in the 2019 World Cup to get that team that have been struggling to turn things around at the World Cup. Like fantastic performance there. But was he unbelievable at Munster? I don't know. Was he? I'm not sure. And I just think some of the selection decisions around this South African team pre-tournament, like he's got an unbelievable amount of resources in South Africa in terms of the players that he's got. You're always going to be competing at the top level with them. You just always are. So I don't know. I'm still out on believing everyone else's hype about Rassie Erasmus, and I just think, you talk about the bench split. That just seems like a crazy risk to me to be taken with a team that's so good. You don't need to take that risk. You're still going to have an advantage with the guys that you bring off the bench if it's 5 or 6. Just give yourself at least 2 backs that you can have a little bit of optionality in the backs. You saw the impact that Robbie Henshaw had. You saw the impact that Conor Murray had on the pitch. Even Crowley, I thought, was excellent when he came on under massive pressure. So I just feel like that was a big mistake, but to only have 1 back on the pitch as well, on his bench. The kicking thing, pre-tournament, huge risk for a team that, like we talked. Jonathan just spoke in his previous answer about everything we talked about coming up, or being an issue in the game, actually having an impact, and it's rare enough that happens. But I think that nearly is always going to happen with South Africa because I don't think the game plan changes massively, if you know what I mean. So it's going to be the same talking points. How did you deal with it? It's the same thing all the time with South Africa, which to my mind makes it even more baffling that you wouldn't have a kicker, particularly if you're relying on your front 10 to really get you over, and then to have a few fantastic finishes, from your outside backs combined with a really, strong defense. That's what you're going to get with South Africa, and it's very, very hard to play against. But to not have a kicker to capitalize on the pressure that you're putting on teams, and even the decision making with the lights in the box, taking it away from the players on the pitch, they can feel the pulse, they can feel what the other scrum is, feels like, they can feel the other pack wilting. You can feel a guy when you tackle him, knowing you got a good shot, that he's going to be, not himself for a couple of plays after. All these things are very hard. You can't really get a sense in the coaching box. And allied with the fact that he didn't pick a goal kicker, for them in the box be putting that yellow light up or whatever they're doing to say go for goal, having made the decision knowing that you don't have a really a 90% goal kicker, that to my mind was a massive error. Should have been going to the corner.
That's a good point, Luke. Like, so those two yellow light flashes on the 50-meter line with no established goal kicker, like, can someone not be like, F off, I'm putting this in the corner. We've a massive pack. We're going to exert the pressure. You saw in the end game when they finally kind of took those options when they had to, when they were more than 3 points or whatever, a point or 2 behind.
And that was very close, that last decision. I mean, like, I actually thought it was the right decision given that it collapsed. There was a moment where it was kind of stuck in there. Really difficult for the ref. I actually thought he got a lot of stick for that one, but it was a real touch and go. And
there was a split second in it. Like,
It was a split second in it. I actually felt that he got a little bit of criticism for that one when really I don't think it was actually deserved. If you look at it with just, and honestly, it's hard for us not to be biased, but I really think at the time I thought, no, seriously, at the time I said, oh, that he's going to get in the neck from some South African supporters for that one. But really, I do think that was actually the right call. So yeah, like I think, yeah, I think they have a bit to answer for at this stage. I think they'll naturally now, because of this, I think, look, all these things that we've been talking about probably get corrected pretty quickly, Will. I feel like the next injury is definitely going to be, no matter what position it is probably going to be a hooker coming in. And then I think all of a sudden the balance of the squad is kind of back to what it should be. That'll be my opinion. I think this is a brilliant game for South Africa. It was a tight one, so it means that Scotland have to put up, an absolute cricket score next weekend and have to beat Ireland by a lot there's a weird kind of set of circumstances that have to happen for them to get knocked out, is what I'm saying. But they're in a very, very good position to qualify through. Yes. So I think they're going to get away with it. I think the decisions that they made around the squad as we said, were glaring, the mistakes they made. I think they rectify them and they'll be in a good position, because I do think they go through to qualify. Obviously pretty much sorted that they'll qualify.
I did find it funny, how magnanimous they were in their words after the game. Ireland were the better team, much better team. They don't believe that for a second. It was the most empty platitudes I thought I've ever heard. Now, they're fair, they put on a brave face, they sounded good, but I know deep down they definitely fancy Ireland again if they play them, and like they are still like massive live option to win this tournament for sure. Jonathan, one thing I want to ask you about is the Ireland mentality or the mental strength they showed at certain periods of the game. In particular, I remember it was actually only 3-0 to South Africa at this stage. It was just after James Lowe ripped the ball and unluckily he went over the line and they got another bite of the cherry to scrum. And I thought the Ireland forwards looked a little deflated. It looked like, they'd missed 4 lineouts in a row in the 22 at that stage. South Africa looked like they were on the verge of scoring a try. But then all of a sudden, Creel's offload goes loose. Ireland get a turnover, kick downfield. That was a massive moment for me, and they kind of grew back into the game. But how impressed were you with just the way they kind of stuck at it? Because there were times in the game when South Africa really looked like to be getting in the ascendancy, and they were always able to come up with a key turnover or kick a key penalty just to keep themselves in the fight.
I think it was the key to the game. Like, I think it's a massively, massively important part of what Ireland have brought to this World Cup preparation. Because if you look at Irish teams down the years, or maybe even just an awful lot of teams at this level, like, there aren't that many, I think, that could have rolled with the punches as well as they did in that opening quarter against a side as good as South Africa without taking a bigger blow. Like, to come out of that period just 3-0 down was a massive, massive win for Ireland. But it is a testament to the way they approached it, their mental fortitude to get through that period. Because, we talk an awful lot about how Ireland haven't faced an awful lot of adversity at this World Cup. The fixtures, the way that they fell for them, they sort of eased into it against Romania and Tonga. And obviously the injuries is just a massive part of the narrative around this.
Jonathan, can I add to that as well? So do you know the two bits as well? Like, if we'll touch on it earlier on. Like, even so, Faf de Klerk's kick that hits the post, they get the ball back in a good position. But do you remember even in the first half, there was that crazy bounce back? Do you remember from the loose kick?
It bounced at Renza, and they almost scored a try from that as well.
Was it Libby? Someone kicked it. Do you remember exactly? And Lowe, and do you know what I actually thought? So Lowe could have got an awful lot of stick for that. I thought it was unbelievably clever, because I think was it Colby or Arenza? I'm not sure who got the ball back. Was it Arenza? Definitely, yeah. Do you remember he kind of jumped for it? And the temptation would have been, I've kind of slipped here, and to hit him in the air. He pulled away, and in fairness to Gary Ringrose, made an unbelievable cover tackle, and we got ourselves back into the game. But that was a real stroke of bad luck too. Like, that really should have been a kick, in a normal situation where you don't
they got
get
3 points
bounce.
out of that. So like their
their
first 8 points came from very fortuitous moments.
And it's a horrible
That's
moment
what I
for
think
Lowe
too.
as well, because you can see after he does pull out, he's then on the back foot, so it almost looks like Arenza just runs through him. So, like, for a player that had an awful lot of criticism about his defensive work earlier in his Ireland career, like, you can almost...
He probably should have made the tackle there, in fairness.
Well,
but no, I agree with you. Sorry, once he's slipped, it's unbelievably awkward, and he has no power. The other guy's coming on to it. But I just thought that was a moment where we didn't panic. You know what I mean? Because he would have known when he kind of half pulled out of that one, he was like, I'm under pressure. You know that it's hard to. We all probably. I don't know if we all played, but in those circumstances, you're doing that. You go, if I pull out of this even, 5 or 6%, there's a good chance of not making this tackle against an international rugby player. To do that and have the confidence not to do it, I thought was like the no panic and the grit to get back in, just brilliant. I thought. I don't know if you had any thoughts on it. I just thought I'd mention while you're
absolutely. And then I think to survive the idea that their lineout had essentially abandoned them, like they didn't have a lineout in that game, so to be able to survive through that period, just 3-0 down, but even later in the game, an awful lot of the week has been spent talking about how South Africa have the edge in the bench. South Africa have this powerful bench. Sort of gets lost in the shuffle a wee bit that South Africa were winning when the replacements came on. So this area of the game that was, we talked about South Africa as front runners. South Africa were a point ahead whenever they unloaded their bench. And the Irish bench was unbelievable. Like Henderson made such a big impact. Sheehan made a really big impact. Baird had some massive, massive moments, especially in terms of line-out defence. He was huge. And then, like Crowley, like we all would have expected Sexton really to be playing for as long as that game hung in the balance. But Crowley comes on. I thought, again, he looked very composed given the occasion and obviously knocked over the penalty. Now, obviously, any international should have been knocking over the penalty from there, but I thought he...
Not Lamani Labok. I wouldn't say it's a gimme for Labok, to be fair.
Like, you have to remember that I'm an Ulster where Manny Labok kicked from the sideline to in the 85th minute to win a URC semi-final. So
you know what that was, Jonathan? It was the 2-footer to win the Ryder Cup, wasn't it? You're like, there's literally only downside to stepping over this
exactly.
thing. No matter what.
Jonathan, there was actually a replay that showed that conversion might have been wide. Actually, in that semi-final, I was like the JFK Zapruder film going through that, being like, I think that's actually wide, but here we won't go. But it's funny you mentioned Jack Crowley, like, and as we were going through it there, how so many of the games, big moments, were actually down to like a bounce of a ball, like South Africa's 2 scores, like the drop goal at the end, like that Willemse could have fielded but didn't realise it had been touched. That was bounced in front of him. You could see the look in his face. That was almost the winning of the game for Ireland because they got the penalty at the next scrum. And it's funny, Jack Crowley in the pocket. At first, I thought he just duffed it. I was like, he was never going to get 2 in a row. But then you saw Smith, to be fair, got a big hand on it. But yeah, it's funny how a lot of the big moments of the game actually came down to bounces of balls. It shows how little there is between the teams, because both teams, Jonathan, can sit here today and point to a litany of missed chances. But I think ultimately, I don't know, did Ireland deserve to win? I'm not sure over the course of the game, but I wouldn't either say South Africa definitely deserved it either. There's so little between the teams, isn't there?
Yeah, like if you look at all those moments, and that's why, like, even obviously working on the game up against a tight deadline, like it was so engrossing because there were all those little moments and they all felt really, really consequential. Like there was no lull of watching a 5-minute, 10-minute period of the game where you were thinking this isn't going to have a big impact on the result. But I think coming out of it, like what you're saying there, Will, is a hugely interesting part of the whole discussion around this game, because you're talking about South Africa and their platitudes of Ireland were the better team. Like I think that's one of those rare games at this level of rugby where I think both of those teams came away thinking that they were the better team and genuinely confident that they would win in a rematch. But everything that we're talking just indicates just how close the game was, how little there is between the two teams, and how on a different night, whether you get a different bounce of the ball or South Africa make better decisions or the Irish line-out works better, like all of those things could potentially be the winning of a rematch. But we're sat here, more than just about a month away from a final. And if these two teams were to meet again, both of them still think they're the better team, even though they've already played.
Yeah, I think both teams come away with it with loads of areas they're going to look at and potentially learn from and grow into. And it's a long tournament. Like, it's funny, we've been building up to this game for so long, years, that it almost felt like the culmination of something, when in reality it's literally the beginning. It's the first big test of if Ireland want to win a World Cup of 5 matches. It's actually like the opening stanza of what will be a very lengthy 5-week slog, whereas it was just such an outpouring. Like, there was so many supporters over there. Like, I'm sure all of you know people who were over there. I knew 1 million people who were over there, and they've been planning this for years. But it's literally just the start now. It actually, this is when it starts getting serious. So,
and it's not going to stop either, because we can pretty much guess the quarterfinals now, and they're not for another 3 weeks. So, like, we're going to have an awful lot of this sort of narrative building up to the knockout games, because the rest of the pool stages, there's not an awful lot of drama left in them.
Yeah, Luke, is there any danger of Ireland over celebrating this game. You referred to it earlier, like, taking too much from it. I saw a few comments. We actually got a few on the YouTube from some South African fans, like, oh, how much it meant to Ireland to beat South Africa, like, as if it was over the top and potentially just like treating it as if it was, as I said there, the culmination of something rather than the start of something. Any danger of that?
Yeah, I think there is. I was really concerned. Like it had a lot of similar feelings. Well, because I wasn't as involved in some of those games that World Cup in 2015. Because I was on the bench, so it's kind of a different situation. To you can be a little bit more cold and calculated when you're on the bench. Now I came on at the end of the game, didn't see some of the histrionics, but I think saw a little bit of that, a little bit of the jumping at the end. I just wish we hadn't, I know it was a big moment, and you might have. It was a big moment. We've been building up to it for a long time. To have a 2-week break, which is probably the only thing that gives me a little bit of comfort, is that there's a bit of a lull after this. I still think there's going to be images of if you're Scotland, they're definitely going to be playing the Bundy Aki interview after the game. They're definitely going to play, Conor Murray jumping up onto someone, all the Irish players singing with hands raised on the pitch. It's I completely get it. I know it's so hard not to get caught up in a big win. I do think the one caveat I would say is Ireland have the week break, which I think gives them a really nice opportunity just to reset, not think about rugby, and they can come back in and refocus. And I think they'll be fine. But I just think Scotland have a lot of ammunition, and they'll be fine too. And they absolutely, like, it's do or die for them. Having lost to South Africa, so they know that they pretty much got to get a bonus point win against Ireland to get through. Bloody difficult task for them. Recent history, or not so recent history, would tell you that they probably won't.
Zero chance
that Ireland will have too much.
There is zero chance of Scotland beating Ireland. I'm saying that now.
I had look, I think it's a big challenge for them, but it's not beyond them. They're playing well. Stranger things, put it this way, stranger things have happened in rugby. And it's nice when you have the shackles off. So we talk about decision making, and the South African team in the box putting up the yellow light. Like, there's only one thing that Scotland can do. That is, so, like, after 30 minutes, they might kick their goals for the first 30 minutes, but if the game is tight, they have got to go for tries all the way through. So they will be going to the corner. It simplifies things for you. And if you have a great day, if you have a food, like, they'll have moves now for weeks because they know they're going to pump, Romania. They'll have loads of trick plays. They'll have seen lots of things of Ireland over the couple of weeks. They'll have dissected us to within an inch of our lives, and I just feel like there is a little bit of danger here that we get a little bit too over optimistic and overlook them. And I do think it's actually very important that we put in a big performance there to get the confidence going into what we all expect is a quarterfinal of the World Cup against, like, really, really challenging opposition who, if you think about their run in, all they are going to be thinking about is probably Ireland at this stage. That's all they're going to be thinking about. And you think about who's in that camp: Joe Schmidt, the one guy who can pick apart defenses like no one else from set plays. All the attacking prowess they have all over the pitch. Our history against them, our history at this stage of the competition. That is the worry, and I just want everyone to come back. I was really hoping that a lot of that stuff that we saw would have happened in the changing room was probably what I was thinking will. And that had me a little bit worried. And I just feel like the ammunition is there for Scotland to upset us. And there's loads of time for New Zealand to put together a brilliant game plan. And they'll be hurting from last summer too. So lots of things working against us here, Will. A little bit concerning.
Yeah, Jonathan, like the point Luke makes about having that week off, it's funny, like, we debated so much before the tournament, like, what was the optimum schedule. We were comparing ourselves to France and New Zealand having their big clash first, but now that it's come to pass, Ireland have played South Africa and beaten them, I think the week off is the ideal time to get out of the bubble, the kind of the adulation, the euphoria of beating South Africa, and just to be able to reset and go again. I think if Scotland was this weekend, I would be far more concerned about maybe overlooking them than getting that kind of few days off, back into camp, and then having a good, like, 10-day period to really refocus the minds. It probably worked out as ideal as you could have wanted.
Absolutely. The flip side of the coin is it would have been the worst case scenario if Ireland had lost on Saturday, because then you would have had 2 weeks sort of building into this last 16 game as it would have been, and you would have been stewing in this real pressure cooker. So that's, I think, why, a couple of weeks ago we were saying that this game really was the key, because it sets the roadmap out for Ireland of how far they can go in this tournament and the route to go further in this tournament. So I do think it's massive having won on Saturday, to have this down week now. You're going to have a few bumps and bruises, but you're probably going to have all 33 players to select from whenever you get to that
The
second
no
week.
injuries is
It's
a miracle,
insane,
isn't it? Like
genuinely.
that is a
If you look
miracle.
around the other teams in this tournament, or even look at past World Cups, like, you're in a really fortuitous position to get to a World Cup without losing one of your first 15. I understand they lost Healy in the last warm-up, but that's a bench player. So to get through to the World Cup without losing a player, but then to play 3 games, like, how often do we talk about the physical toll of a World Cup or the physical toll of a Six Nations? Even just look at Ireland in the last Six Nations, like how many times they had to use the depth of their squad. To be here now 3 weeks in, having not lost a single player to injury through the 3 games, that's why we're all talking about how Andy Farrell couldn't have scripted this any better. They've got a few days off now. They'll come back towards the latter part of this week. Come this weekend, after Scotland, Romania, and South Africa, Tonga, Ireland are going to know what they need to do. Most likely scenario is that they're going to need a losing bonus point. Like, if you look back at recent results, you're saying there's 0% chance of Scotland winning. I don't know what the chance of them winning with 5 points and denying Ireland a losing bonus point is, but the last time that would have happened in a fixture predates bonus points in the Six Nations. Like, you're going back to 2007, the last time Scotland put a beating like that on Ireland. So 1 foot in the quarterfinals would probably be the way to put it, I suppose. But the luxury that Farrell now has in approaching this game and being able to approach it in myriad different ways is just, it'll be the envy of every other coach in this competition.
I wouldn't be opposed to try to kind of engineering a 1 point for Ireland, 5 points for Scotland, South Africa gets sent home kind of result, kind of a gentleman's agreement. I don't know, maybe kind of a back alley deal potentially.
It would come down to what Scotland put on Romania, because I think for any of this to come to pass, like, they're going to need to put near 100 on Romania.
So you've done that. I was literally just going to say, has someone actually worked through the permutations of that?
So
because I actually haven't. I'm annoyed that I kind of brought up, because I hadn't actually looked at what has to transpire.
So it's presuming that South Africa beat Tonga with a bonus point, that would put them on 15. Scotland would need to get to 15, and then Ireland would need a losing bonus point to get to 15. So at that point, it comes down to points difference. But obviously for Ireland,
that's right. That's what I'm talking about. Not the actual points from the matches, because I'm on top of that part. It's the points differential within the actual game.
So if the three teams end up tied, which we're assuming that in this scenario they would do, but for Ireland to get a losing bonus point, then Scotland would need to, or for Ireland and Scotland to go through with Ireland getting a losing bonus point, Scotland would need to make up the points difference against Romania, which would mean that they would need to put over 100 on Romania. So that's why
it's unlikely.
Assuming that South Africa get 5 against Tonga, then it's very unlikely that,
that
Ireland and Scotland find their way through. Exactly. There's always a chance.
There's always a chance. Luke, in terms of Scotland selection, we got a few comments in. Rob, Connor, Tig, and Leanne, all asking variations of the same question. Any changes for Scotland? Like, not wholesale, obviously, but, would you like to see maybe Dan Sheehan come in? Maybe Conor Murray after his very good performance off the bench? Like, would you be looking at kind of little tweaks, like maybe giving key bench guys a start, or would you run it back with the same guys if they're all fit?
I run it back. Keep going.
Not even starting Dan Sheehan?
Yeah, like it's...
Like, he'll be starting him in a quarterfinal.
I thought Kelleher was outstanding. I thought Kelleher was outstanding, and I wish I knew more about lineouts, but it did seem to me that they didn't really try to change the cadence too much. The first 3 or 4 lineouts that they lost, it looked like South Africa were right up with 2 guys either side, like really difficult conditions. Now, he didn't throw great, but he was brilliant around the pitch, and it sounded like he scrummages his like that. I thought some of the scrummaging, I know they were under pressure, but it seemed to me that they were, once they settled down after the first 2, and they looked like they were pushing earlier, engaged, their timing was wrong with the referee or something. Just looked very nervous about it. I actually thought they worked their socks off, and I thought he was excellent. I mean, we all saw that tackle at the start of the game as well. No, I'm not sure I would yet. I'd probably be minding Sheehan. Like, I think Sheehan might have an edge in that duel, but I wouldn't be riding off Kelleher at this stage. I thought he was brilliant outside of that, and I thought a lot of it might have been possibly brilliant South African defense. They've got big guys and big lifters too, which makes their lineup pretty formidable. But I think there's a little bit of thinking to do around how our lineup was functioning. And the timing. It looked like it was quite easy to time. It looked like they were trying to beat them in the jump rather than actually throwing any dummies or anything like that. Look, I wish I knew more about it, Will. I really do. But I'd be kind of, I'd be picking the exact same team. And look, you could, I wouldn't have a problem with him tinkering either. All those guys you mentioned had brilliant impacts and played brilliantly. So I get the point. But I think it's Cup Rugby now. And I'll be sticking with the guys who did the job for me.
Jonathan,
personally.
what do you think? Like, I personally would like to see a small freshening up with maybe 3 changes. Henshaw potentially, Dan Sheehan, Conan onto the bench, maybe one other, just of key personnel. Because I agree with Luke. We've been burned before. Our teams have been burned before with like making changes and they're not going well. But I feel like making 2 or 3 of really top quality international players should maybe not cause any dip in quality.
Yeah, for sure. Like that's something that we used to like praise the All Blacks for, being able to make 1 or 2 changes and having, I suppose, the impact of those changes negated by the quality all around. And I think Ireland are now in a position where they can do that. Like we've seen, when you make 10 changes, say for those middle autumn internationals or against Italy, you lose a lot of fluency. But to go with the sort of team that played against Romania, where Mac Hansen wasn't starting and Josh van der Flier wasn't starting, or then against Tonga where Jameson Gibson Park didn't start. Like I think we could see something like that. And the players that I would probably be looking at bringing in, or the players that I suppose you're looking to give a rest to, would be, Tyg Burns played an awful lot of minutes already at this World Cup. Caelan Doris has had to shoulder a real load, being the only recognised number 8 in the absence of Jack Conan and Andy Farrell's decision to bring an extra back rather than a forward. So those are maybe 2 guys that I could see. Do you bring in Conan if he's fit? Do you bring in the likes of an Ian Henderson, give those guys a break? And then the other interesting one's going to be Bundy Aki, because at the minute he's player of the tournament and he's been so important to what Ireland are doing. So is there a temptation to bring in Robbie Henshaw for Aki, and you're balancing up whether you're, I suppose, protecting Aki or risking him losing a bit of momentum over the space of what would then be 2 weekends without a game?
But Henshaw was brilliant when he came
absolutely.
on. We've got McCluskey there as well. Like we've got an absolute, like I think Bundy's been, I completely agree, he's been unbelievable so far. But he's not so important to the Irish game plan that Robbie Henshaw is going to be a problem to bring in, or even I would say McCluskey. Even though I think there's probably a bigger difference between maybe McCluskey and the other two, McCluskey's still a brilliant player. So I don't know. I think we're really looking strong in that area. Your probably issue with that is maybe it looks like, who's your natural, who do you naturally swap out for Ringrose, who's one of those guys in the backs alongside Keenan that you're kind of like, I really wouldn't like to lose them. They're kind of important to me, just in terms of who we brought that naturally plays those positions week in, week out. The Henshaw-Aki partnership has worked very well for Connacht in the past, and every time they play together, I just don't think Aki can play 13 personally, and nor can McCluskey.
Well, we saw that against Italy.
They don't do it well defensively. We saw what happened against Italy, So I think that's your only. You might say, maybe I'll keep Henshaw, or maybe I'll play Henshaw 13, but tricky, isn't it? Like they're good. Do you know what? We're in a situation where they're all good problems. I think, and I agree with Jonathan. Like if I was putting my tinkering hat on, you might say something like Porter, maybe. He's had a lot of minutes. He's pretty important. He's obviously on your bench anyway. Maybe O'Mahony, just age profile and just, injuries.
It would be his 100th cap, though. I feel like they might want to. He'll get it anyway, I suppose.
Oh yeah, but if he's on the bench, he's definitely getting on anyway. You know what I mean? I don't see that being a problem. I know it's nice to run out at the start of the game and stuff, but yeah, I don't know. You got to do what's right for the player. Like we've got to pick the team like we're going for the jugular, and that we're qualifying. That's why my first answer about this is that we don't change. But at the same time, if you are thinking that you want to go further in the competition, well, is it an opportunity to preserve someone and keep him on the bench so you still have the impact? O'Mahony be one of those guys who said, Baird was pretty good. Maybe I give him a shot in there too. So I don't know. It's interesting. They're good problems.
If you're looking at it like, and it is kind of, I don't think it's looking forward too much. Realistically, Ireland are going to be big favourites to play Scotland. But if you are looking forward, that you could be playing 4 weeks in a row Like, this is definitely the only game where you have the luxury, Jonathan, I would say, of potentially changing one or two people of your starting team, because after that it's New Zealand, another in the semi-final, and then a behemoth in the final. So this is the only game you might be able to say, oh, well, we have Porter on the bench and one or two others, and still maintain, 80% of the team, but get a little bit of rest into some key guys who will have to go the distance if Ireland keep winning.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we've probably round off 6 or 7 changes that you could make. But like, we're not talking about this like it's the middle autumn international. Like, we're talking about making 2 of those 5 or 6 changes. Maybe 3 at a push.
Yeah.
So it's, and the thing, Luke talks about the enviable position that Ireland are in, and he's exactly right, because you're talking about Henshaw, you're talking about Henderson, you're talking about Conan. Like, you're talking about bringing in British and Irish Lions. We're not talking about weakening the team massively so, but yeah, what you're saying is 100%, because after this week, it's full go for what you're hoping 3 weeks. Like, as much as you don't want anyone talking like they're getting ahead of themselves, at the same time, that's the goal. The goal is to be playing in the finals. So there is an element of planning around that, of this is what gives us the best chance to achieve our stated goal, which is to win the World Cup.
And it's a funny one. Like, at this moment in time, like, Ireland are in the best position of any team at this World Cup. Like, France have an injury to Dupont, the best player in the world. There's uncertainty around his availability. South Africa, we've listed out, they're out half issues. They have to play France first and foremost, most likely in the quarterfinal, which is a massive test. Out half issues, hooker issues, their bench, questions. Are still a great team. Ireland, as you said, Jonathan, will have all 33 guys fit and firing. It looks like they have a week off to refocus after getting a massive victory, and then they can put their foot to the floor. New Zealand are the other big behemoth. They've lost their first game. They're kind of trying to find a bit of form. So I think every team in the tournament would swap places with Ireland right now, which is kind of a good place to be. Also, I don't like saying it because it seems like I'm putting
a familiar
very
place in the group stages for
But
us.
At the same time, you couldn't have, we said, Jonathan, last week, or Luke, I'll go to you. Like we said last week, Annie Farrell couldn't have written a better script coming into South Africa. Coming in post South Africa, as you said, no injuries, got the victory. Great moments, but a lot to work on as well. It feels like it's still really building very nicely.
Yeah, and like, I think as well, within the group, they'll be really pleased that they got the win. It speaks, hugely to the mental strength within the squad, but also the quality. Like, they had lots of quality moments in that. They broke down one of the hardest defenses to break down. Like, and I don't think it'll get as hard for them. Maybe France possibly pose the same kind of challenges for you defensively, or from an offense perspective, because their defense is so up in your face too. But not as much as South Africa, I don't think. And I thought we dealt with that brilliantly at times. Some really nice dummies and positioning under massive pressure, and then some great passes. You think of the Gary Ringrose one to Keenan in the first half. That was a beautiful floated pass. Johnny Sexton, a lovely kind of dummy chip into a throw over the top to hands. There was some really lovely bits of play. So I agree, Ireland are in a brilliant position from an attack perspective, because I think it only gets easier for you as you go forward. I think they'll have plenty to think about. They won't, when they look at the video, they'll still say, you know what, I think it'll bring them back down to earth. That's why I said earlier on, I think it'll be easy for the team. Like, it won't be because Ireland aren't mentally in the right place, because I think the week off is key. Like, it's so positioned nicely for them. They've 33 guys on their feet, most likely coming into the Scotland week. And they had a brilliant test, which kind of was on a knife edge. So you think, while they were really happy about it, had a couple of beers, enjoyed each other's company after, and then got back to the families to relieve the pressure valve, they'll still come back in and say, there's a bit to think about here, and we've got to finish this job. So I expect them to perform really well in the Scotland game. I think it's well set up for them to do that. I do think as well, Scotland there's plenty for them to be fired up about too, which is obviously a concern. But I think we should be thinking like we're in pole position. We need to act like it. And that does require that you give the respect to all the teams. I think they'll do that. I think Ireland are in a brilliant position, I agree, to answer you directly. And I think all the other teams would love to be where Ireland are, playing well, coming off a gritty win too, and a week off before you get into, hopefully 4 weeks of massive challenges back to back. So brilliant position. Couldn't ask for any better. It's all set up for us to go on, and I don't even want to say it, but yeah, it's set up well for us.
One thing actually I wanted to say to you, or mention, this was because, as I said, watched the game back just before we came on, and the end game, after kicking that last penalty, it was a very frustrating. Like, Ireland, they gave away 2 really sloppy penalties that gave South Africa massive field position. It felt like they were just, they can't take the 3 points now, therefore I'm just going to go after these 2 ruck balls. Dan Sheehan and Ian Henderson, really sloppy off-feet penalties that if they just kept their discipline, South Africa were in their own half. It gave them a massive entry. Ultimately, there was a split second away from losing that game, and those just 2 penalty decisions would have been very, very costly. So I think they actually could have managed the last 2 minutes a lot better than they did. That's just maybe one thing they could look back on potentially, and keep your discipline a little bit better. But that's neither here nor there. They won the game anyway. So we'll finish it off as Australia, Jonathan, and Eddie Jones. And it was billed as the weekend of the 2, marquee clashes, Saturday night, Sunday night, and God, Sunday night got away from them very, very quickly. Even, halfway through the first half, they had thrown in the towel, it looked like. And by the end of it, 40 points to 6 tells its own story. Eddie Jones' future very much up in the air. They've one more game against Portugal. I think they can technically still qualify, but for all intents and purposes, they've been eliminated for the first time ever in the group stage. Like, what are your thoughts about the Eddie Jones Australia project and how it all kind of unraveled on Sunday night?
It's the biggest story of the World Cup. Like, not even just us here in Ireland, but like everybody watching the World Cup is watching it through the prism of who are the contenders, who's going to win, and that's understandable. But through this first 3 weeks, the biggest story in a global rugby context is Australia, because Australia are a world rugby superpower that look nowhere near it. And if you look at how rugby makes its money, it's 3 World Cups and it's 3 Lions Tours. Australia's hosting both of the next editions of those, and they look like a complete and utter rabble at the minute. I am as guilty as I'm as guilty as anyone of thinking this team was not going to go and contest for this competition, but show progress along the way with this young core that they had. And I know they were unfortunate in that they lost Skelton and they lost Tupou, and those were 2 massive players who had experience, and they've been left with this real void of experience. But to wake up on Saturday morning and to read that Eddie Jones has allegedly had an interview with Japan before the World Cup, and then to see his post-match press conferences where, even in the follow-up press conference where he seems to be taking offense that he's being asked about this, like there's some sort of rule that it should be off limits to ask about a report that he could have shot down on Sunday night. He kept talking about how he was committed to Japan, committed to Australia.
I'm not sure. We're in that's still to be decided.
So, he's talking about he's committed to Australia, but he stopped short of coming out and saying, one, that he didn't have the job interview. He tells the journalist, "I don't know what you're talking about, mate. That's not an answer. You're asked whether you had the interview or not." And then asked if he's going to coach Japan, and he talks around the issue without saying that he's not. And, even last week, the things that Drew Mitchell were saying, the things that other former players were saying about Eddie Jones is coming out and saying, "Oh, I take full responsibility." But what does that actually mean in actuality in the camp? Like, to go into the World Cup essentially having said Carter Gordon is our fly half of the future, and then a game and a half into the World Cup, you give up on that. Like, the thinking just doesn't seem aligned at all, when the whole narrative around bringing Eddie Jones back was for this golden decade where they were going to restore Australian rugby to what it should be, to have the Lions turn, to have the next World Cup. And it's just incredible. Like, it is incredible how bad they've been, because despite the results, there were elements of what they were doing in the Rugby Championship that wasn't that bad, that showed evidence of progress. And then they go out and they beat Georgia, and yes, we've seen Georgia now draw with Portugal, so maybe that says more about Georgia than it did about Australia at the time. But if you had said after the first weekend that Australia were going to be this bad against Fiji and Wales, I don't think anybody would have believed you. It's a massive, massive story.
Yeah, it's actually well put there, as you said. Probably the biggest story, but obviously we were so wrapped up in Ireland, South Africa and stuff, we probably haven't honed in on it quite as much. But look, does Jones go after this? Do you think he was given this big contract, as Jonathan said, Lions Tour World Cup? It was all about boosting the profile, bringing it all together. Is it all going to be unravelled after 9 matches ultimately? Do you think he's gone after this?
Oh yeah, I think they should definitely get rid of him. Yeah, like I don't know how he got the job in the first place. I mean, it's not like he's coming from having done a brilliant job with England. I think he's kind of the bit of the Rassies about him, that he has this reputation of, he's brilliant at the World Cups, and all this kind of long-term building. It always suits someone to be talking about long-term building. Like, there are some projects, and this Australian project definitely needs a little bit of that thinking. But at some point, like you have to produce something, you know, and to all the evidence from what we can see about his tenure at England and now Australia is that he seems like kind of unstable, you know, weird mind games with players. You hear loads of weird stories about how he, you know, his man management from the England days even. You know, I think he can't keep a coaching staff together. You can't make sense. Similar to some of Rassie's stuff, you know, it's almost like some kind of dictator-y type things. You know, you're not supposed to question you know, our great leader, you know, our fearless leader. Like, no, like you have to answer questions like everyone else. And I completely agree with Drew Mitchell's like, oh, I'm taking responsibility. Taking responsibility is actually answering some questions and giving some insight as to why you were making certain decisions and what the logic was behind it. Particularly if people are finding it hard to understand. Like things like this shouldn't be hard to understand. It's not. Rugby and life generally, you know, when you're looking at decision makers, there are some very difficult things out there, but rugby is not one of them. Understanding what, you know, the decisions were behind leaving certain players and what the logic was, it's not hard to explain that, Will. And it's actually, I think, if you're running, you know, a national organization's rugby, you have a right. We have a right to be asking the questions if we're the supporters paying good money to see the team, as to, you know, to at least ask the question and to expect, you know, within reason, an honest answer. And he just doesn't give those. He doesn't think he's very entitled to me. He thinks he doesn't have to give any of these answers to any of the people who are paying good money to watch the team and who want the team to do well. We just have to kind of trust this this really long process, and we're going to be ready for the next World Cup. Like, that's ridiculous. No one can plan that far ahead. You just don't know what situation you're going to be in. You know, so I just think, to me, he's a busted flush. And I think they should get rid of him very quickly. I was amazed he got the job in Australia.
I found it funny. I was, you know, watching some clips. A friend in Australia forwarded on to me of Michael Hooper was doing the punditry over there. He actually gave a fairly hearty defence of Eddie Jones, like, you know, saying no one's working harder than, and he was obviously one of the guys who was left at home, one of the really experienced heads. He said no one's working harder than Eddie Jones. He's, you know, in bed at like 12 o'clock at night working hard. He's up at 3 a.m. then answering emails, working hard at night. Like, and like people talk about Dave Rennie as if it was the best coach of all time that they let go. He had a 38% winning percentage. It was the reason he was sacked. Like, watching Virgin, it was actually a good debate between Rob Kearney and Matt Williams, but like going on about as if Dave Rennie had like them on the cusp of a massive breakthrough as well. Like, obviously Eddie Jones clearly has not done well. Like, they were eliminated for the first time ever in the group stage. But I don't think it would be ridiculous if they actually did keep him on. But he would have to. Maybe he's incapable of doing.
The relationship is done,
Yeah,
Will.
like,
The relationship with the media.
I think he
like,
could have
absolutely
survived a bad World Cup. I don't know how you survive the fractious relationship that he had with the media before he left, and then, like, I know, look, I'm obviously coming at this from the perspective of a journalist, but like the way that he dealt with some of those questions, I just find unbelievable. Like, the idea that he actually mentioned that sort of what Hooper had said, you know, to question my commitment whenever I'm working all the hours of the day, like, that's all well and good. But if you had a job interview for a different job before the World Cup, everyone that has any interest in Australian rugby has every right to question your commitment.
Yeah.
Like, if you're looking.
Yeah, but there's no point. Like, what's this 3 a.m.? Why are you answering emails?
He's so committed. He's so goddamn committed.
That's making a point. Sorry, that's making a point. Like, that's being silly. Like, get up at 6 if you're a hard worker or whatever. Like Jamie Dimon, who runs like, he's up at 5 a.m. Like, what are you 3 a.m.? That just means you're not sleeping. You're not thinking right. That explains loads of things to me about why
like
we can't
sleep deprivation.
None of us can make head. Well, none of us can make head nor tail of any of his decisions because he's clearly like has a lack of sleep. Like, I don't know. Like, I just that thing is thrown around a lot about him, and he clearly doesn't understand people, which is the most important part of any managerial role. Because he can't keep a staff of some very, very good coaches together in England. And I think he's had some similar issues with Australia. And he can't make any coherent decisions around the team. Like, how you would go to a World Cup and not bring your captain or bring Quade Cooper is absolute insanity. Like, absolute insanity. You have to put in some kind of performances. You have to have some guiding hands on the pitch so that you don't have all these young players who come back absolutely traumatized with not getting out of a group stage. Like, that sets you back. It doesn't bring you forward on the path. You can drop the guys after the World Cup and move on. But a World Cup is not about that. I just find he is unbelievably entitled. He seems like he doesn't feel like he has to answer to anyone. And he has this thing about the work ethic. It's driving me mad. Like, just work properly, work efficiently. Get up early if you want to do the long hours, no problem. But the 3 a.m. emails, you're just a gobshite to me then.
Yeah, well, it's funny, when he was the England coach towards the end, he was talking a lot about how, the Six Nations were almost being sacrificed on the altar of the World Cup in 2023. This is the first time I've seen, a World Cup sacrificed on the altar of another World Cup to come in 4 years' time, which is just, Carter Gordon, that whole thing has been an absolute fiasco. He's been brutal, but, when he's been selected by Eddie Jones has to carry the can as well for that decision. Conversely,
and he'd already made the decision because he didn't bring Quade Cooper, so the decision's been made. You can't go back on the decision now and say, oh, he's not our fly half anymore. You're at the World Cup, you don't have anybody else. You left the other guy at home. It's indicative of muddled thinking if you're giving up on somebody that you said was the future a game and a half into the World Cup when you didn't bring the alternative. It makes no sense.
Well, conversely, Warren Gatland now has delivered this, probably the signature performance, arguably, or his signature victory of his whole time coaching Wales. They're in the quarterfinals. They're probably going to be playing Argentina, which looks like potentially, which would be a very winnable game. All of a sudden, they're into a semi-final on Ireland's side of the draw, which is obviously we'll cross that bridge if we ever come to it. But to be fair, Luke, I got to hear this one. He's a great survivor. In the Six Nations, they were brutal. Alan Wynne Jones, Tipperich, all of a sudden they were off the radar. And yet here they are, they've won all their matches, and all of a sudden, despite the club scene problems and maybe the lack of top-level talent compared to the previous teams he's coached, he's gotten them ready for this tournament.
Yeah, I know. At some point, you've got to say it's not luck, but I know this run through feels a little lucky. I mean, Eddie Jones getting the Aussie job, that's a godsend. Argentina, in fairness, I would expect them to pull together a performance in the quarterfinal and beat them, but he seems to have timed it well. The one thing I would say about Gats is that he does seem to be able to get everyone moving in the same direction, and he doesn't overcomplicate things. And I think they're very important things at a World Cup. He does have a really good 9 and 10. That does help as well. There's not going to be any issues with kicking goals and whatever game plan you outline, you have experienced hands there to guide the team around. It's definitely not a vintage Wales group, and Welsh rugby we know is in a tricky position, so it's a very, very difficult job for him to go and deliver. Having said that, he's been successful everywhere he's gone. He actually has been successful versus the Eddie Jones kind of fallacy. I think he is Warren Gatland is excellent at his job and has proven to have been for a long period of time. I would say that you do hear things. I think there was a lot of some of the older players leaving at that time was a bit concerning. I think there was a little bit of rumblings from the camp that they were disappointed with, I think, how he treated them when the players were kind of striking. There was a little bit of rumblings behind the scenes on that one, but that seems to be in the back window at this stage. And as I said, at a World Cup, he seems to have got everyone. That looked like a happy changing room, which of course it would be after a 40 points to 6 pumping, but it seemed like a happy changing room. Some of the footage, say Beard getting the 50th cap and singing the song and stuff, they look like a happy group, so they'll be dangerous, I think. And I think there's enough quality in there that they won't fear whoever they come up against in the, say it is in Ireland.
If Ireland beat New Zealand and lose to Wales, I'm never watching another game of rugby ever again. That's just, I'm gonna resign from this podcast, and I'm just gonna go and live in the mountains with no Sky or BT Sport.
I didn't think about it till you said it, but Joe Schmidt in the quarters, Warren Gatland in the semis, and then Rassie in the final. The content's going to be off the scale.
Oh, God. I think that's a good place to end, and we're getting far too far ahead of ourselves. We'll just reflect on a great pill weekend for the moment. I'd like to thank Luke and Jonathan for joining me this week. We'll be back later in the week with plenty more left-wing podcasts. You can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or listen on independent.ie. So until next time, thanks so much for listening, and goodbye.